Hi, it's Ashexi, and I'm here in my backyard ready to do a felting demo for you. So before we get started, there are a few things that you need. You need, of course, your fiber. You want to make sure that your fiber is something that's going to felt, and I did a video on how to felt up a test patch, so you should take a look at that. You want to make sure that the fiber you have is going to felt before you put all of the labor in laying out a big patch of fleece to felt. I like to use, so you need water, soap, something to keep you hydrated because it's a hot day. I like to use Dr. Bronner's, especially like the mint soap, but it doesn't need to be mint. I have here a large pitcher of the hottest tap water I could find. It's almost hard for me to put my hand on the thing. And then I have my tea kettle that just came off the stove boiling, and that also I can barely touch. So I'm going to put those aside because we're not going to use the water for a while. And then lastly, I have a reed screen, and it's just something that you can get at World Market. I would say Pier 1, but they are, I guess, no longer. And it's just a reed window screen. You can see the hardware here. So I am going to unroll this. I don't want the hardware end, so I'm just getting rid of that. And I'm going to leave about that much hanging off the edge of the table just so that it stays in one place. And then you want to kind of, this gets used for felting a lot, and you just want to make sure that there's no debris in here we don't want it to get felted into your fabric. So the fiber I'm using is the fiber that you saw me card, and it's in large bats like this. I could just lay out the bats, and when I do larger pieces I will do that, but we're not going to do that today because I have a feeling most of you are going to be using roving, which is about that wide. So I'm going to lay out as if this were roving so that you can see what that's going to look like. So we're basically going to do a 4-layer piece of fabric, and this stage I call making the poodle pile. We're just going to kind of build up a pile of raw fleece, and when you know, play with it a little bit before you start to do this. But if you grab the end of your I'm blanking on the thing. Anyway, if you grab the end of the strip of fiber, it's going to come off kind of in a pretty consistent thickness. And so I'm going to start laying out patches of this, and you can see I'm slightly overlapping them. I don't want to just put it down next to, because you can see there's a thick, and then there's a thin in the middle. So I'm just going to take the thin edge here and put it over that thin edge. It's a little windy. And your goal here is that you want to try to achieve a consistent thickness and not have thin spots, because you're making a fabric. And if you think about a woven fabric, it's a consistent thickness, and you want to try to achieve that. This is going to be fun, by laying out your raw fleece. And so this is a really key part of the process, and you don't want to just rush through it. You really want to take your time and get things set out nice and even. So we're not going to make a huge piece of felt today. So I'm going to start, that's going to be my first row here, And then I'm gonna do another row still with the fibers all going this way. And again, I'm overlapping the edge slightly, both between here and between this row and this row. Trying to achieve, and there's a little hole right there, so I'm gonna just put a little extra fiber there. And as you do this, you're going to want to occasionally kind of stand up and look at it from above and really make sure that you don't have any gaping holes in your layout process. Okay. And so now I'm going to start on the next row. And I can see there's kind of a thick piece right there. I'm just going to spread it out a little bit. Otherwise you'll get kind of a chunk in your fabric. The tree is giving me gifts that we don't want in our fabric. And then I'm going to do my next row. That piece kind of became a hot mess, but I'm just going to go with it. What I've got. There's a thin spot right here, so I'm gonna just kind of build that up a little bit. Not too much, but you want to try to have it an even layout. So I'm adding another row. Okay, and so that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows all lined up and overlapped to make the first layer. All the fibers are going this way. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and I'm going to have the fibers go this way. And I'm going to make another layer. Whoa, no! Okay, so the wind does not love me. Same idea. And you can start to get an idea of why I call this a poodle pile. Because it's just a big pile of floof. Okay, and I don't know if you saw that, but there's a little kind of chunk right there, and I don't want chunks in my lineup here, so I'm going to remove that. Space space it out, and there's a little hole right there, so I'm just going to slide that in there. And I'm just continuing to do, we're in our third row here. And again, just really paying attention to there's another seed or something in the fleece. Just really paying attention to sort of keeping it an even spread with no thin spots. Okay, and looking at it from above, I can see I have a couple of little thin spots that I want to mediate before I get to my next layer. Okay, so I'm about halfway through layer 2, still going. This is not a quick process, folks. You've got to allot yourself some time to do this, and it's also not a process that you can rush. When we aren't filming, I usually have some really mellow music going while I do this, because whatever you can do to get yourself into slow down vacation mode. A little Bob Marley always helps, because this is not something that you want to really rush through. It's a slow and kind of meditative process. Thank you, Molly. That's Molly. That's not going to be used now. That's some fluffer. My lucky bird. Let's see, I think that came from right there. There's another thin spot there. It's got some more chunks in it that I don't want. And you can see I'm starting to get totally covered. We talked a little bit in one of the previous videos. This is not a pristine process. It's messy. You're going to get covered in sheep hair and detritus from whatever's in the wool. In a little bit, we're going to get wet and soapy. So, don't wear your best clothes. This is not that kind of game. So I'm going to stand up, and I've got a couple of thin spots here that I'm going to fill in. Okay, so that's 2 layers. The first layer is all the fibers are going this way. This layer, all the fibers are going this way. And so now I'm going to do a third layer with all the fibers going this way again. After I pick out that pine needle. So we are under a couple of pine trees, and they are dropping random stuff on us. So that's fun. I'm going to start back up at the top here. Just kind of tucking the loose ends in there because it's a little windy and I don't want those to catch the wind and lose our hard-earned pile here. hot do you think it is? 85, 90 Fahrenheit? So it's pretty warm. I always have better luck felting on warm days. So a 60-degree and cloudy day is, you're gonna work a lot harder to get your fleece to felt up. So warm days are really helpful. So we're just continuing to get this third layer on. And I think we have enough fleece for 4 layers. I know this part is kind of boring, but it's the most important part to really get right. So you should really take your time. Okay, the fibers are all hard to figure out the fiber direction from that pile, so I'm going to move on to the next one. And I have some pitch on my hand, so everything's sticking, which is awesome.
Would you like help?
What?
Do you want help?
I can't hear you.
Do you want help?
No, I'm good. Thanks, Sunny. Okay, so you can see I almost put that down folded over like that, and that can sometimes cause kind of flaps, almost like envelopes in your fabric. So you want to make sure not to put it in like that. You want to make sure that the ends are all extended and nothing's folded over itself. And as you do more and more of this work, you will make all the mistakes, and you will learn what works and what doesn't work. No. So I think we might just do a 3-layer piece of felt because the wind keeps picking up. And so you're probably wondering, like, okay, what does 3-layer piece of felt mean versus like a 4-layer or 5-layer? If I am doing a piece of felt to use in applique, I want it to be pretty thin and fine because it's going to be layered on top of another piece of fabric, and it doesn't have to be sturdy on its own, super sturdy on its own. If I'm felting up a piece of fabric to use for a pair of booties, I will use like 5 layers. I will do 5 of these layers because that'll get you a thicker piece that'll be more sturdy, and will take a little longer to wear through as you wear it. Thank you, tree. Hats, maybe 3 or 4 layers. think maybe we can go for one more layer. So we'll make a 4-layer piece today. And I'm going to take a little shortcut because I can. Okay, and with the roving that you're going to have, just taking a piece of the roving and spreading it out like I just did is probably not going to be a good idea because the roving is a little bit more solid and compact, and this you can see is pretty thinned out. It's spread out enough to felt to its neighbors, and if you just took a strip of roving and set a bunch down, they're not going to be open enough to felt to their next door neighbors, so you don't want to do that. So as we're laying this out, we're being really careful not to have any thin spots. You could see by the wind coming up how precarious this pile of hair is, and when we're getting ready to pour water on it, we don't want to come in and pour water in one spot because the pressure of the water will make all the fibers move away from that spot and it'll create a hole. So we want to be really careful about how we introduce water into this pile. And we're almost to the point. I've got one more row here to add. We're almost to the point where we're ready to do that. And I just use my tap water. I try to felt. Oh, I don't know where that came from. I try to felt with water that's as hot as my hands can stand it. And like I said before, the water I have here is pretty hot. But I'm not going to pour it straight on. So you can take, if you have a spray bottle available, you can take and spray this to start wetting it down. It's really, really hot water. Molly, can you go get the spray bottle from inside?
Yes.
And you can see just a little pressure has made little water holes in here that we don't really want. No, honey, the green one that has borax in it. We don't want that. Okay, so I am just coming in to see how much water I have, and it helps keep the fibers from sticking to your hands to get a little soap on them. So I'm putting direct pressure down and then very slowly coming up. I'm being very careful. You can see the dry part here. We want to make sure not to fold those fibers over on top of the wet fibers. just a little soapy water, just to help with the initial getting wet. And again, I'm being really careful. You can't find it? All right, we'll just do without it. I'm being really careful not to direct a hard stream of water in any one place, but to just kind of sprinkle it around. I'm coming straight down and straight up. Just trying to get this wet. And you can see there's a fold happening here. I'm going to want to come in and make sure that that doesn't fold in on itself and create a flap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the edge. And just slowly make sure wet. We're not going to get any pockets like that. Just like you can see, that was kind of folded like that, and I don't want to come down and crush it and make it fold over. I want to come in and kind of spread it open and make it flat. Okay, and I'm not coming in and crushing and rubbing back and forth yet. It's too fragile to do that. I'm just coming in really lightly and just kind of trying to get it all wet and get it all to start thinking about becoming one piece of cohesive fabric. You can see I'm just kind of pulsating my fingers. I'm not moving my whole hand. I'm just okay, you can see that needs a little work there. We need a little bit more water here. And again, this is a really slow process. And I'm just going to work from this edge out so that we don't, if I started here and got this all nice and flat and then started here and got this all nice and flat, we'd have this big, you can see this kind of poofiness here. That would be a problem later. So we're going to kind of work it from one end here. You could start at a corner and kind of fan out and do it that way. And again, I'm pouring the water on my hand first so that it doesn't make a hole in the pile that we so painstakingly put together. Thank you, tree. can see there's another part here where it's kind of folded over, and you don't want it to make a flap. So we're going to just very patiently kind of work that in. Get it to sit where we want it. It's a little more soapy water. This is kind of a balance between enough soap to lubricate it so that it doesn't stick to you, and so that it will stick to itself, but not so much so that it just slides around and doesn't stick to itself. So there is such a thing as too much soap in this process. And I've said before, there is a whole science behind pH in this. That's never been my thing. I don't measure pH. I don't do it that way. I work a little bit more organically. So if that's your thing, there are lots of books that talk about that, and there are a lot of resources out there, and you can get really into that and make it a much more scientific and sure process. There's another pine needle. You bored? That was a big sigh from my daughter. Why don't you go get yourself a popsicle, kiddo? And so the table, all the water's kind of draining from the edges and ending up in the middle here.